how that discussion could have led to giving someone an unfair competitive advantage that we had in there. And that's what we went into the executive session for, based on this explanation on the bottom of the thing. What was proposed to be talked about in there would not have given any person that wants to go after that property a competitive advantage for what was proposed to be discussed in there. I want to go on the record to say that that was an inappropriate meeting and it should never have happened. That's all I have to say.
Okay. That will be in the record. We'll move right into administrative reports from the Board of Control, Madam Clerk.
Number one, the Board of Control recommends council authorize a blanket purchase order to EJP in the amount of $20,000 for various repair parts for the maintenance of the city's water system. This expense will be charged to the water fund and is in the 2015 budget. Vote 3-0.
Okay, council, to speak to this, we need a motion, please.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Pena.
Hello.
Mr. Munch.
Did everybody miss me? EJP is where we get our stuff for fixing the distribution system, clamps, pipe, megalugs, all tools, everything under the sun. This is basically the third blanket that we're coming for this year. 20,000 can last 6 or 7 more breaks, or it can last 1. It all depends on the size of the break and what we need to fix it. Right now we have about $5 left on the last one, so that's why we're here for another one.
Mr. Hoffman, questions?
I like water, and it's in the budget.
I like the way he explains.
Keeps water from running down the street.
Mr. Pena.
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Thacker.
It's in the budget.
Mrs. Smith.
No, and we didn't even know you were gone, so sorry.
Mr. Tall.
Ouch. I have no questions. It makes sense. Thank
Mr.
you.
Evans.
No questions.
Mr. Fields.
Thanks for all you do.
Thanks.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Make him raise his right arm as well.
No.
Okay, if there's no further questions from council, all those in favor of accepting the Board of Control's recommendation, authorize a blanket purchase order to EJP in the amount of $20,000 for various parts for the water system, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Next one, please.
Number two, the Board of Control recommends council authorize a purchase order to White Service Center Incorporated in the amount of $27,758 for a 2015 Dodge Charger for the Police Division. The $27,758 is net of a trade-in allowance. White Service Center Incorporated was selected through a competitive bid process. See attached bid tabulation. This expense will be charged to police capital improvements and is in the 2015 budget.
Okay, council, to speak to this, we need a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Smith. You got this one done.
I got this one. Chief Lingerer was planning on attending tonight and had something come up at the last minute, so I helped with the bid process, so I'll step in his place tonight. Basically, the police division in the past has taken an old Dodge Charger once it went from being a police cruiser and made it into an unmarked car. They have one that is an older car that we used as a cruiser and then turned into an unmarked car, and it has over 130,000 miles on it. And that vehicle actually still used for prisoner transports. It goes long distances sometimes. And just from a reliability standpoint, I think the police division wanted to make sure that there was one unmarked car that was a newer car that was more reliable. So this would be an unmarked Charger with some police capabilities, including a cage and those type of things in the back. So, and then we will trade in the, I forget what model year, 2009 Dodge Charger that they're currently using in that role.
Mr. Pena, questions?
No, no questions.
Mr. Thacker.
We have additional expenses to put the cage and so forth in.
That's included in that price.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Mrs. Smith.
No.
Mr. Paul?
Makes sense to me, it's in the budget, but one question with regards to the unmarked cars. They don't use that on like stakeouts and things like that, right? I mean, this is just a transfer type of vehicle and,
I think, yeah, and I'm not completely clear on how it's used, but I do know that it will actually have a lighting package that can be activated, a siren that can be activated, but it's not going to be a marked car with a light bar on top and that type
Right.
of thing.
because everybody's going to know to look out for a charger if we're just using the old cop cars, right? So,
Understood, yeah.
okay, all right. That's all. Thanks, Don.
Mr. Evans?
Well, I'm trying to find the bid documents here.
It's clear to you.
It would be right behind the Shade Tree Commission minutes.
My question is, when I was looking over that, is the reason that we're, even if we got a lower bid, would we buy a Malibu?
We have a spec that we've written for a police cruiser. I think the spec is all-wheel drive or rear wheel, but not front wheel.
Okay,
There are other manufacturers that make a front wheel vehicle, but there is one manufacturer who does not.
okay, and I know that we only have one Chrysler dealer in town. Are we,
We received a call from a dealer in Van Wert who's bid on our cars before, and they did not end up submitting a bid. But they were emailing questions during the bid process, so I'm not clear why they did not submit.
okay. I just wondered if we're going to stick with strictly Chargers.
Well, by having the all-wheel drive spec, technically a dealer could bid a Ford Taurus as a
Oh,
police
okay.
cruiser.
All right, gotcha.
The Dodge Charger on the state contract, which this isn't state contract, this is a local bid with a local spec. On the state bid, the reason the Highway Patrol has Chargers is it's the lowest price cruiser on the market.
And I guess what I'm driving at is lowest isn't always best. And are what's Ford's offering, would it be better, or how are these Chargers holding up?
I can't speak to that, other than we've been buying them for a while.
My understanding, they're holding up relatively well. We've been using them for the last several cycles. I don't know how far back to go. There for a while, they're using the Crown Vics. The Crown Vics got out of that package. So this has been kind of the standard that we've seen locally and in the area. So I can't speak details around, specifics to them, but that they seem to be working.
Okay. That's all I have.
Mr. Fields?
Nothing.
Mr. Hoffman?
Nothing.
Okay, if there's no further questions from council, all those in favor of accepting the Board of Control's recommendation, authorize a purchase order to White Service Center, Inc. in the amount of $27,758 for a 2015 Dodge Charger for the Police Division, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous, thank you. Next one, please.
Number 3, the Board of Control recommends council authorize a purchase order to White Service Center Incorporated in the amount of $15,226.46 for a 2016 Ford Fusion for the Police Division. The $15,226.46 is net of a trade-in allowance. White Service Center Incorporated was selected through a competitive bid process. See attached bid tabulation. This expense will be charged to police capital improvements and is in the 2015 budget. Vote 3-0.
Okay, council, to speak to this, we need a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
What's this one for?
Yes, in 2008, when we had the great flood in the back parking lot, and we lost 7 city vehicles or something like that night, we got insurance proceeds, and there were some used vehicles that were purchased at that time for the police department for administrative use, the chief, the lieutenant, and having vehicles to go to trainings and things like that. So those were purchased used at that time. We bought a 2002 Ford Taurus, and we bought a 2005 Chevy Impala. This year, the chief, no one has really been utilizing the Ford Taurus. It's not in great repair. I drove it to Columbus for a conference and said I'd never drive it again. I actually took the back way to Columbus and stayed off of 70. That's how scared I was driving it. So that being said, we have those two vehicles that would be trade-ins for this, and this event vehicle would essentially be used by the chief, but also be available, I think, for general administrative use by the police division. We received a total of 3 bids for this vehicle. We had a Ford Fusion, a Chrysler 200, and a Chevy Malibu, and the bids were relatively pretty close.
Mr. Thacker.
I have no questions.
Mrs. Smith.
No.
Mr. Paul.
It's in the budget. I know I worked with Matt on the budget. I remember the Cruiser, but I don't remember this vehicle and why we put it in there.
I think they may have changed their plan a little bit as the year moved on as far as these two vehicles. But my understanding, and Chris can speak to it, my understanding is the budget's available for both vehicles.
Okay.
What happened was they were budgeted for a Cruiser with full equipment, and splitting it up and not getting the Cruiser with full equipment, just getting a regular Charger, they had additional money available to replace the chief's car by trading in the other 2 vehicles.
Okay. Okay.
So we're getting 2 for what we had budgeted for 1 complete Cruiser.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Evans.
No question.
Mr. Fields.
Is there a reason why we went with the Fusion over the Malibu? Other than there was $1,000 difference.
Price. The spec was written, it could be a Malibu, it could have been a,
Okay.
I mean, we got all 3 models. It could have been a
Okay.
Honda Accord if somebody bid a Honda Accord.
I'd hate to ride in that.
Yeah, but but the spec was written where it could be multiple manufacturers.
No other question.
The Ford was the lowest.
Nothing, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Pena.
No questions.
Okay, hearing no more comments from council. All those in favor of accepting the Board of Control's recommendation, authorize the purchase order to White Service Center in the amount of $15,226.46 for a 2016 Ford Fusion for the Police Division. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next one, please.
Number 4, the Board of Control recommends council authorize a purchase order to J.J. Cunningham LLC in the amount of $137,427, which was the lowest and best bid received for the FAA's AIP 2015 Taxiway Taxi Lane Rehabilitation Project at Grimes Field. Pending official notification from the FAA, this expenditure will be split between the FAA AIP grant 90% and the Airport Capital Improvement Fund 10%, and is in the 2015 budget. See attached. Vote 3-0.
Okay, council, speak to this. We need a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
As you were aware, early in the spring, we went through the process of going out for bids for the taxiway and repairs and rehabilitation. And through the bid process, we had 2 responsive bidders. I think the engineering estimate was around $180,000. This bid came in at $137,427. So we believe we've been awarded a bid. It's been in the newspaper, and everybody seems to know it, but the FAA hasn't notified us yet. But in order to be ready when they do, as soon as we get the official notification, we want to launch the project to get things rolling. So we're just asking for approval, pending official notification from the FAA to go ahead and get the work started.
Mrs. Smith?
No.
Mr. Paul? I'm sorry, going the wrong way.
Did a couple weeks without doing that, but
Yeah.
okay. All right, so of a total 137K, we're basically going to fork over from the Airport Capital Improvement Fund about 14,000,
Roughly,
right? So the rest of it's grant money, so we're not going to owe that,
correct.
and we're going to have the project done. When's the estimated time that it would get finished, assuming they tell us?
Well, they
that-
want to get started the week after Murphy, which is this coming weekend, but right now they're kind of getting the material lined up and ready to roll, waiting for approval, waiting for notification from the FAA.
Did they explain how long they think they have to shut the
Just
runways
whether-
down?
If they've got to shut the runway, parts of the area down off and on, but it'd just be a matter of about probably, maybe up to a week,
Okay.
but it may not be all at one time, maybe
Okay.
sections.
Okay, good enough, thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Yeah, it's pretty cut and dry.
Mr. Fields?
Nothing.
Mr. Hoffman?
Nothing.
Mr. Pena?
No questions.
Now, Mr. Thackeray.
No questions.
Okay. No further questions from council. All those in favor accepting the Board of Control's recommendation, authorize a purchase order to J.J. Cunningham LLC in the amount of $137,427 for the airport taxiway runway rehabilitation. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Number 5.
The Board of Control recommends council authorize the Director of Administration to amend the existing contract with Hall and Associates Incorporated to authorize additional task orders in the amount of $19,100 for bid document preparation services and bid process assistance services for the Q3 JMC redevelopment project. The City of Urbana anticipates that a portion of these costs will be shared with a third party who will be financially assisting with the environmental remediation costs at the site. This expense will be charged to administration and is not in the 2015 budget. Vote 3-0.
Okay, council, speak to this. We need a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Doug?
Yes, as we've talked about this project and the timelines that we're working with or against, basically, as we've mentioned, the environmental remediation work, especially on the Beach Street portion of the Q3 site, needs to take place in November, or having work starting on the remediation in November, and the reason for that is the seasonal levels of the groundwater at that site. With that being said, there are certainly other parts and pieces of this puzzle, but essentially, in looking at having a bid process take place and being able to have a contractor ready to go, assuming that all the other pieces fall into place, we have to start on the bid process now as opposed to later. A minimum bid process is about a 30-day process. So in looking at timelines and approvals along the way, we felt that we needed to get the ball rolling on this part. If the process would cease somewhere along the way and we decide we're not moving forward with the project, we would end the bid process wherever it is, and we would incur the cost up to the date, and this contract essentially would, or these task orders would, we'd pay what was due at that time and the balance wouldn't be due. If everything ideally goes well and we move forward with everything, the third party would participate in approximately 50% of this cost, which is still being negotiated through an agreement. So unfortunately, we just, in order to meet the bid deadlines and be able to start in November, if everything else falls into place, we have to start this process sooner than later.
Mr. Paul, questions?
Yes, but I'll get them on the second round if that's all right.
Mr. Evans?
Why not wait till the sheriff's sale, to find out the determination of the property?
Because what we've been talking about to this point, in order to get the bid packages prepared, the bid packages out on time in order to get the work done in the November timeframe, we're trying to work in parallel with this process of the ordinances and that to get the bid packages out, scope defined, pending the city taking possession of the property. At some point along the continuum, if at some point the city ends up not taking the property, then the Hall and Associate PO is canceled, we stop it, and anything, the work they performed to that point, we would be obligated to pay, but we wouldn't be obligated to pay the entire PO amount if we don't complete the entire work. So it's a matter of trying to get a head start so we can meet our timelines and getting the bids back and be ready to start work, assuming we take possession of the property.
Well, September 2nd is 2 weeks from now.
Right. So there's work they can be doing right now to get us in position.
If your goal is November, you'll have 2 full months to prepare all that.
Yeah, we have the third reading for the ordinance will take place September 15th. So that's actually 2 more weeks. So in order to get things rolling, we've got to get ourselves in position. We can't afford to wait a month.
Wow. Well, I'd just like to say that you and I have talked about it. I feel I'm very skeptical about the fact that the city is going to get this property based on what you've told me. We're not going to accept the property unless the taxes are forgiven, correct?
That's our position.
And we're not going to accept the property if the taxes are suspended.
If we can't get clear title with absolutely no strings attached on the tax side, we're not anticipating taking the property.
I'm pretty confident that we're not going to get the property, no strings attached.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm pretty confident with discussions with the people from the county that the Board of Revisions, at least 2 members, are not in favor of forgiving the taxes. So the city of Urbana is pretty certain that we're not going to receive the property free and clear. So this is a moot point. We're not going to get the property, so why spend the additional dollars, period? Whether you can say that 2 months from now, if it doesn't happen, we'll put back what we didn't spend. The fact is we continue to spend money on what I called 3 months ago a bad deal, and a bad deal that got worse. So it's my position, council, that we not spend any more money on this project. If by some chance we receive the property and get a clear title to the property, then we can start spending money on it. But I don't think it's we're guardians of the taxpayers' dollars, and I don't think it's good policy to spend money on a project that's going down the tubes with the idea that it's going down the tubes and there's not a lot we can do about it unless we want to pay, is it $284?
$268,000.
Yeah, we'll have an opportunity to bid on it on September 2nd if we're willing to pay the taxes. But we're not going to get the property, folks. And I urge you to call the auditor and the treasurer.
It sounds as though the auditor and the treasurer have already voted before a public meeting's been held.
I'm just telling you what I heard in discussions.
There's a public meeting that has to be held for them to make that decision.
Yeah.
And that meeting has not been held.
I hear what you're saying. I went to gather information. We're hearing our side, and I heard their side. And he's made it clear that we're not going to accept the property free and clear. And we didn't have to have a meeting to do that. And they're making it clear to me that they're not going to forgive the taxes.
But
whether they voted or not, they're not going to forgive the taxes. We're not going to get the property, so let's not spend any more money on it. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Mr. Fields.
What's the most worst-case scenario that the bid doesn't go through? We authorize this money. We don't get it. What's the most we're going to be out of? You got any idea? Out of the $20,000?
I believe that there's initial $12,000 in that range that's to put the bid document together.
Okay.
So in theory, once the bids hit the street, there's that cost incurred. Then there's about just shy of $7,000 for the bid process itself, which we've offered to provide some of those services so we have a smaller fee for that scope of work.
But in doing that, you're trying to get ahead of the program so that if
Correct.
we do get it free and clear, we're ready to start getting rid of dirt.
Realistically, here's the other thing on the timeline. So if, the consultant's going to spend probably 2 or 3 weeks just putting the document together and going back and forth and having legal look at it and all of that before it even hits the street. So we've got that time built up. Then we go on the street, we have a 30-day process just until bids are due. Bids would have to be acted on by council. Contractor has to receive notification they've been awarded the project. They have to have time to mobilize to the site once they're told that they have the job or don't have the job, which that takes time. And the other thing is, in the environmental remediation, there's a building identified as Building 6 that needs to come down prior to the remediation so they can stage the containers that the soil is going to go in to be classified before it goes off-site. By classifying it saves cost on the project. So all those things are at play in the schedule. On top of that, you can't tear down Building 6 until you've sent a 10-day notification to EPA because it has asbestos, and that also has to be removed. So it's there's, to hit that November timeline to do the groundwater, that's what this whole, the only reason this is even before you tonight.
How much have we already put out there? You got any idea?
I think probably, I'm going to take a stab. I think the last summary we gave you was somewhere around 30,000. Probably we've added another 10 to that maybe over the last year or 6 to 8 months, whatever that is. So somewhere in the north, 40,000 or so. Trying to get.
That doesn't include the grant money.
That doesn't include the grant money. The grant money was over 200 and some thousand back in '09.
Yeah, roughly.
It's a bad deal getting worse.
We have a situation, I think everybody's well aware of the property. It's in our yard, so to speak, and we're trying to get it repurposed so it becomes a benefit to the community, and,
that's
not
understood.
become safety and hazardous. We understand all that.
We
So,
understand that.
So
we're making a good faith effort to try to move it forward.
So the 19,000 is a good faith. And we've
I think
already
this is
spent well
kind of
over
one of our
200.
last opportunities to finish the race. We've
And
run
if
the
we don't
race.
we don't do it now, we got to wait till next November.
If we
right?
don't get it in this window, the next window is November of '16.
Okay.
Which
Thank you.
jeopardizes our economic development possibilities.
Okay, thank you.
Which is part of the reason for the executive session, because those parties have to remain confidential.
No other questions?
Mr. Hoffman?
I think I heard it in Gene's last question. So regardless of whether we get the property or not, let's assume we acquired the property and it was too late to remediate this year. It pushes us back to this time of year next year. And you're saying the issue with that is the interested parties, to be unnamed, that jeopardizes that relationship?
We have parties who are interested in the property, but they want to move quickly. When I say quickly, early in 2016. So our plan would be, and if things work well, we get started in November. We get the remediation, demolition, a lot of the cleanup out of the way, and we can actually start some process where they can, we can either start turning some of the property over during the first quarter, second quarter of next year. And again, a lot of that's going to determine on what they end up finding as they start cleaning and remediating. We just know what we think we know at this time based on the reports we've had from the EPA. So, people that are interested to happen sooner than later. I'm not saying, I don't want to sit here and say if it happens in November 16, they're not going to be around. I can't speak to that. But the indications we have is they're anxious to get started, and we can't get started until we start cleaning up.
Do we have any kind of, are these good faith agreements with these parties, or are they contractual agreements?
That's the issue, Mr. Hoffman. If we had agreements with them, they would be a matter of public record, but we do not. It's all been negotiation at this point.
I understand.
Anything else, Mr. Hoffman? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
What happens if we just didn't even, never mind. I'll let Tony. I got some things to think about.
Yeah, it's kind of like we're caught in between a rock and a hard spot. As overseers of the tax dollars here, what do we do if this doesn't go through? It's just like we're throwing money out the window, so to say. So, the people are looking at us. What kind of feeling do you have as administration? Are you feeling like we're going to get this? Or it's just like, hey, it's...
Like I say, we started this process back in June of last year, the expedited foreclosure, and unfortunately the terminology or the nomenclature expedited doesn't necessarily mean fast, as the name implies. We've been through the process, we've kind of run the race. The questions that are being asked at this point are questions that were raised back early in the process, and we thought they were addressed. At that point, it was our understanding we were going to move forward. When the property was clear, we would take possession and we would start this process. What changed in the last meeting or so, I can't speak intelligently to explain why things changed from one meeting to the next within 7 days, but they did. So at this point, I think we've committed so far, I think it's almost, it's prudent of us to try to at least take it to the next step and make that determination. Again, as we speak through the ordinance, you're going to see language in there that I think is pretty clear. And, you know, there's a difference of opinion. People will say things behind the closed doors that they won't say in public. People will tell you one thing, but then they pipe up, you know, when it comes time to go public. I've seen that happen a lot. So I don't want to make a decision based on what I think somebody's going to do. All I can do is I've got the cards that I have in front of me, and we're going to play them. If the decision is we're not going to play the cards, that's the decision you all have the right to make. I just believe we've been far enough down the pike that if we stop now, I don't know that we're doing ourselves a justice to stop prematurely. That's my position, or I wouldn't be bringing this to you. If I felt, you know, if I was close to 100% sure that it wasn't going to happen, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. You know, to Al's point, is there a risk? I think there's always a risk whenever you're trying to do something different. There's always a risk, but there's also the reward that can make it benefit. Without the risk, there is no reward. So without the risk, and then it stops, then we have a property down there that's going to remain that way until somebody decides to do something different. We've made our good faith effort. I think you've been on board. We've kept you up to speed. If I've missed something, please share it with me, but I believe we've kept you up to speed as we went through it. So this isn't anything that's coming out of left field. It isn't anything that we're trying to, you know, end around. This is the cards we have, and we're asking to play them. And if we don't play them, then we're, you know, the game stops. It's really that simple. So
We're talking
about
about
4 or 5 more weeks.
We're talking about a property that was certified delinquent on the tax rolls in 2007. We're talking about a property that is the largest unpaid tax bill in Champaign County. We're talking about a process that's taken over a year to try to clear it off the books so we can do right by the community. And to Carrie's point, just recently we've had a change in what we're hearing in the community. And but at the end of the day, if the county ends the process, it can go to the auditor and be offered for $50 and still have the cleanup attached. Or the county could end the process and still leave the tax bill attached. And then it's still sitting there causing us issues. So it's a tough situation.
Absolutely. And one thing I like to say is thanks to all you guys for working on it. I mean, everybody in this community wants to see that place cleaned up and move forward, and vibrant business in there in our community. And right now it's a total eyesore, and it'd be sad to see this thing go under right now. But thank you for your information.
Mr. Thackeray.
What are your trigger points? When are you going to say, okay, we're going to pull the cards back in and we're done? Is there a key thing that's going to pop up in your head? Okay, we can't get the taxes taken off. Okay, we can't do this. Or I'm just interested in what's going to trigger you to say, okay, we could.
Ultimately, it'll come down to a clean property in terms of tax liabilities and financial encumbrances. The other part's going to be the funding coming on the backside to allow us to finish the other part of the cleanup. You know, we kind of rough and dirty, we talked about a cleanup that we have approximately half of it committed, if you will, from a third party who's taking responsibility for their share. We have to come up with the funding for the other half. Again, we're talking relative terms here. So with all the different entities that we're looking at through Jobs Ohio or other grants and those types of things, we're hoping to get to the gap where we're down to, once the property's clean, you know, we may have to assume maybe a short-term loan or something until we transfer the property, and the sale of the property will pay off that loan, and we, well, for all intents and purposes, walk away from it even. You know, there's talk out there that, well, the city's going to make a lot of money. Well, I don't see it. I don't see a lot of money on the table in the numbers I'm looking at. And anybody believes that their city's going to come off, you know, with a huge windfall in this, I think is sadly mistaken. You know, our hope is to break even, try to recoup as much of our money that we've spent. You know, whether we get it all back or whether we get none of what we spent back, we don't want to incur additional long-term expense with it. and we want to turn it around, get it productive, so we've got tax money coming in on the income tax, the property taxes go back to the county, the school gets their money, the senior citizens get their money, everybody gets their piece of the pie if it's productive. You know, it's been out of production now since 07, 08, certified delinquent in 07, so that means it was probably delinquent in 05, 04, 06, and folks that are now asking for their handout, they want their money, they had an opportunity to go get it. Well, the guys were still down there working, and the guy was still sitting in the city of Urbana, and for whatever reason, didn't do it. So now that we've carried the bricks, now it's an opportunity to say, can I jump on the bandwagon and get some of that? Even though we've talked about it a year ago, thought was put to rest. So that's the reality of it. So I can't say it any more eloquently than that.
So the question is, where do you say, okay, enough is enough?
Well, it comes down.
You don't have to play that hand if you don't want, because that's part of the.
At some point, it's going to come down to funding. I think that's going to be the ultimate thing. If we have a clean property sitting there with no tax liability, and we can't put the financial package together that makes sense, we push away, and we learn, we stop.
And that tonight might be the end of the funding, to a certain point, if we can't continue. What we're talking about here may be the end of the funding, in your opinion, because we're not going to spend the money to have the bid packages put together. Is that a stop, or is that a delay? Or maybe I'm not asking the question.
Well, I don't know if I'm not sure that I'm hearing everything you're saying, so I apologize.
Maybe I'm not asking the question right.
I think the roughly 12,000 to put down together the bid document, looking at where the timelines are with the sheriff's sales and whatnot, and that money essentially would be expended.
Okay, so I've got the floor.
Right, yeah, correct. And then once we release the bids, then that starts the meter on the roughly 7,000.
Okay, so we've spent 200 and, I mean, the project has consumed 200 and how many thousand?
We received a $265,000 grant to assess the property.
So what we want to do is we want to pay about another 7%, which is, I think, is nominal, to try to get it over the top and get it on a schedule that'll maybe come out all right for about another 6 or 7% of what's already been spent. If I'm reading it right.
Well, the grant from the state was to do the assessment work, so
right.
We weren't out anything, but taxpayers of the state of Ohio are out something,
right.
You know, because they've made an investment in this site as well.
You know, it's,
so,
you know, to me it's too bad that the county doesn't put the same emphasis on job creation that we do. If they'd forgive the taxes, we'd be all set. That's all I have.
Mrs. Smith.
Okay. So, if we don't give you the 19,000, are you still going to go to the sheriff auction and bid on it?
I'm not going to bid at the sheriff's sale.
Okay, so if you don't get the $19,000, your hands is washed in the Q3 project.
You give me the $19,000, I'm still not bidding on it.
Oh, you're not?
We're not bidding. We're not bidding on this property. We're going to let the sheriff's sale. If some Joe Public out there decides he wants to put up $268,000 and take the property, we stop our processes, everything stops, and we let him deal with the EPA and the county and everybody else. Because we aren't, at that point, if somebody else buys it, we're out. We're done. Our clock stops.
Okay, so you're just wanting the 19,000 to go forward in case we do get the property?
We're trying to get moving, so when and if that property becomes ours, we are running and not gearing up to run and then miss our window of cleanup in November.
Okay, that's all I have.
We have a contractor ready to roll, assuming the funding and all these other things work themselves out.
Mrs. Smith, the ordinance that's also part of the agenda tonight, council would also have to approve that ordinance to give the director permission to make a request once it goes to once it's been through the sheriff's sale. So there's two parts of this. It's not just the 19,000 for whole, it's also the 3 readings that ordinance would go through to go through the county process.
Okay. Yeah. That's all that I have.
Up to you.
So just so we're clear, let's just talk about process and schedule here, just so we're all speaking the same language. So we were on the slow-moving expedited process that we've now been kicked out of for whatever the trigger was that the county said we can't do the expedited process anymore. That's fine. So their next step is the property goes to sheriff's sale. Okay, we know there's $268,000. I'm just kind of throwing what I understand out there. So the minimum bid that the county's going to take is going to be $268. Everybody knows what's hidden in the closet. I've heard numbers of a couple million to get it cleaned up. Assuming that no one bids on it, then it's got a second sheriff's sale on the 15th or 14th? 16th? Okay. Same situation, right? Minimum bid, $268, assuming that the Board of Revision doesn't decide to change the tax lien or wipe it out. Okay, so assuming no one bids on it on the 16th, now where are they at?
If the city has, if council has acted to adopt that legislation and the treasurer has agreed to forgive the taxes, then the clerk has already forwarded that legislation saying we're gonna be taking it. That's the ordinance that's coming up later in the agenda. If the treasurer said, no, we're not gonna forgive the taxes and we don't have the other funding lined up, then we're not gonna be putting forward that request
The other funding is
for the cleanup.
for the cleanup, okay. So basically, I'm kind of looking at this and I'm scratching my head because you go through 2 sheriff's sales, you got 270 grand basically in taxes. If nobody buys the property, they're not getting their 268. So they can sit on it all they want. They're never going to get their money. The schools aren't going to get their money. The property just sits, right?
Sits and collects more taxes.
Which doesn't make any sense. They have an opportunity to, perhaps after the sheriff's sales, wipe the debt, get the property back in play, and start collecting their taxes. So that's why I don't understand why they would want to hold on to this 268. If you guys know something I don't,
I'd like
tell
to
me.
say, I can't keep my mouth shut. I gotta say this. These taxes go back to 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. They were negligent in collecting that tax from this Mr. Price who owned Q3. Now we're at the end where we could come in, clean up the property, and now a couple county commissioners, a treasurer, and an auditor want to hold the citizens of Urbana responsible for that $270,000. Because that's where this money's coming from. It's coming from the citizens of Urbana. But you guys are in charge of that money.
Right, I get that. If we stood up and said, okay, we're going to pay the tax bill to get this moving, well, I think we're not going to do that. I think pretty obviously we're not going to.
Why should we?
And I think, from what I can gather and having talked to one of the commissioners this morning, their position is, they have a duty to their taxpayers as well. And so they think that.
Same taxpayers.
Well, and yeah, a lot of respects, that's true.
No,
but,
it is.
They're saying, well, we want to get our tax money. Okay, and I understand their side, I get it, but, long distance or long-term and strategically, it makes no sense to me.
They'll have a
I don't
property
get it.
sitting there collecting more tax debt, doing
Right,
nothing.
Right.
And they're fine with that.
Right, which I don't quite understand that either. So that's basically the process, right? You've got a sheriff's sale on the 2nd, a sheriff's sale on the 16th. And then if nobody buys it, then we're back to square one. We have nothing going on with it. It sits.
If nobody buys it, it is forfeited to the to the state with the county as a subdivision, and then it would go to auditor's sale, as Mr. Evans referenced.
Okay, so there would be a potential sale of the property some future date.
For whatever they can get out of it.
Which is going to wipe the 268 out anyway. Is that right?
Not necessarily.
The new purchaser will get the 268 then.
And the cleanup.
Plus the cleanup.
And the cleanup, right.
I'm not sure that's correct, because an auditor's sale, it's offered for $50 and it starts fresh. We've dealt with it here in the city.
It puts them in the position of the original owner, so now the Stars liens could be resurrected at an auditor's sale.
Okay.
Now the what could be resurrected?
Now the Stars liens.
Oh.
There's an opinion from the Attorney General related to that just came out of Lima.
Right, okay.
In a traditional sheriff's sale, there's a property on College Street that they put through tax foreclosure sheriff's sale twice. It's going to an auditor's sale now, and it'll be offered for $50. So
But again, okay, so they.
So the
somebody-
taxes
I
of
buy it for
14,000 on that are going to be wiped out because nobody bid them.
So if I wait a year, I can buy Q3 for $50
Or less.
Plus clean it up.
plus clean it
Plus
up,
clean it up.
right?
And hope there's no,
Okay, I'm getting a ton of different answers here. Is the 268 wiped out at the auditor sale or not?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Might
So
be a
this-
slightly different process. So I don't
Okay,
know.
all right, that's fine. I'm just trying to understand process so we know what we're getting into. So, okay, so you're looking for 19 grand, we're giving up basically 12 from the get-go. I honestly don't see them giving up the 268. I don't think they're gonna do it. I don't think they care. I can tell you the truth. I don't know for what reason it is, I don't know what the heck they're thinking, but it seems to me they'd rather hold on to their 268 rather than collect however hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars are gonna collect over the next 20 years. Or how many jobs are gonna be created over there. And how many jobs from those jobs being created we'd have in the city. I just don't understand what the hell they're thinking, I gotta tell you the truth.
Can I ask a quick question? Does
I
any-
think
Sure.
we should go back around.
Yeah, does anybody understand?
well,
Let's keep
our
it
council
order.
rules say you get one shot at speaking and then,
This is a pretty important issue. I think we should be able to give rebuttal.
you got 3 minutes.
So,
He's not done.
yep, almost. So, okay, so if it seems as though we're not totally clear on exactly what's happening. If we decide, let's say, we want to table this until the next meeting, 2 weeks, what does that cost us as far as our schedule? I know we're talking about November to try to get the water done, I get that. If we decide to wait for 2 weeks before we vote on this, what
If
does
we're
that
speaking
cost?
to the Board of Control item and the Board of Control item only, which is
Yeah,
what we're considering, we essentially lose the time of them getting started on the bid document,
Okay,
which then potentially looking forward in schedules and all those things that have to happen in a traditional bid process to do a construction project and get it under contract and get the contractor here, we start to really narrow that time frame down.
so, okay, so we know we're going to be out 12. What are we giving up in the budget? What, are we giving up something for this 12? Because it's not in the budget right now. Is there anything that we're giving up for the rest of the year?
Sure.
Any line items? Is it just coming out of the general fund? Where we got to take the 12 from somewhere, the 19 from somewhere, so where's it coming from?
We have some projects that came in under budget, and we have some that went over. So obviously, we're getting into closer to the last quarter where we'll start juggling the money to get everything in the black, to get it settled. So
It's coming from one of the departments.
Okay.
Someplace for it to come from.
Okay. All right, well, that's all I have. Thank you.
If I may, one thing you gotta remember is I've been to several of these meetings, we have 2 companies that are ready to buy the land and get busy, and we don't have, if you have a guaranteed 2 more companies to come in, or 1 company to take the whole thing over, that's fine, but right now, Marcia has 2 people that would like to start businesses there and get going as soon as possible that are pretty much guaranteed that they're gonna start. If we don't do anything, it'll sit, the county is not going to do anything with that. It's going to sit there just like it is, and we have to maintain it because they say it's inside our limits.
Well, but see, that's the problem, and that's my point of trying to understand what the heck they're thinking. They're going to hold on to 268 and get nothing in the
Well,
end.
right.
It just doesn't, I don't get it.
And at one meeting, the county prosecutor was pretty much guaranteeing us that this was going to happen, that there was going to be given up. He said, these people, we're sorry it happened, but something happened, now we have to take it to auction. That was at one meeting I was at. He said, I just about guarantee it, this is going to happen. So, I mean, it's up to you guys to decide if you want to, it's a roll of the dice without a doubt, but you did it with the paper mill.
I mean, you've got to invest, and I get that, and the total dollars that we're talking about in reality is small. It's very small.
Worst case scenario.
Our total
sits there
budget
like it
is how
now.
much? Our
The
total
weeds
budget
keep
is how
growing,
much?
And it's
30
still
million?
contaminated.
Yeah.
That's worst case scenario.
Right.
It's still contaminated, the weeds grow, the trees grow, and it's ugly.
Right.
It's worse than what it looks now.
As a point to, you mentioned the success of the paper mill. The city had about $150,000 in turning that thing around outside of the grants that were received. But we all know what benefits the sewer fund has received as well as the income tax base and bringing that place back to life. So, part of our function as government is to make some investments that spur new investment in our community, and that's one where we've had a success, but we also had to put some money out to make that success happen. I don't know the exact number, but it was somewhere in the $150,000 range over several year period, not including staff time. But I think we all know how we won on that deal.